When you're working in virtual environments, you can set your memory options when you create the virtual machine. But there are some aspects about the memory options that you need to understand, and I want to go over them in this video. And I dedicated this to a separate video because memory management can get more complicated when you're working in a virtual environment under certain conditions. Now, before we get into what can go wrong with the memory aspects of virtual computing, there's one foundational thing you need to always remember, and that is to make sure that your host system has plenty of RAM available to it so that it can run properly and it can support the running applications that it has, that it can support the virtual environments that are running. And so that's square one, if you want to think of it that way. Make sure you have enough RAM memory left over after you've assigned it to your virtual machines so that the host system can do what it needs to do. Now you can use the Task Manager tool in the Windows OS to view the available host RAM and see what's going on there. You also obviously want to make sure that each individual guest operating system has enough memory to avoid what's called page faults. Now if you don't know what I'm talking about specifically when I use the word page faults, then you need to watch the video entitled Understanding Page Faults, a separate video. And if you don't understand, you can watch that video and I'll do a little animation and explain what a page fault is. And you may want to stop here, go watch that video, and then come back. But if you know what page faults are, you don't even have to sit through that video because you're already up to speed here. But you do need to understand that a page fault has a much more serious impact in virtual machines than it does even in physical machines. And in physical machines, page fault's an extremely dirty word. So now let's talk about how we monitor these. In the Windows operating system, we're going to use the Performance Monitor tool. We can run that, and we can take a look at that memory performance object, and then we can monitor the pages per second counters. Now, this is talking about the page faults per second that are occurring. Now, if you look at Microsoft's documentation, generally, like for a server product, they're saying anything more than 5, you got a problem. In the virtual environment, there are knowledge base articles out there that say up to about 10, you're probably okay. The farther you go over 10, you've got a possible page fault issue, which usually means you don't have enough memory allocated. Now, on the Linux side, you want to run vmstat. You want to monitor the SI counter, and this gives you the kilobytes swapped in from a disk, and the SO counter gives you the kilobytes swapped out to a disk. Now, here's the next thing, and this is what tends to complicate it, and it will get you kind of chasing your tail, if you understand that analogy, when you're trying to deal with these page faults, because a page fault is not necessarily a page fault in the sense that we traditionally have thought about these things. There are two types of page faults that can occur. The first one is the one that we're really worried about, that is a hard page fault. This occurs when the page is found in the page file on the hard disk. So we've had to go out to the hard disk. A soft page fault occurs when the page is found somewhere in memory. Now notice that, in memory. So soft page faults have much less impact than that hard page faults have. So that's something that we want to be aware of. Now, when we look at Performance Monitor, it's going to report page faults, and it's not going to distinguish between hard and soft page faults, so you need to keep that in mind. So what's the easy fix on avoiding these page faults? Is to make sure that the host system has plenty of RAM and make more RAM available to the virtual machine. Okay, and that will generally fix the problem. However, we've got a new issue out there, and you can really sum this up by saying that in our world now, RAM continues to get cheaper, it continues to get faster. We have 64-bit operating systems, 64-bit processors, which means they can address a whole lot more RAM, and as more RAM becomes available, the need for a paging file decreases because we have a lot more memory available, and our page faults become, quote, soft. So we're not having the hard page faults, we're having the soft page faults. So as you load a system up with a lot of RAM, and then you put a lot of RAM on the virtual machine, it may be reporting a lot of page faults. However, those page faults may indeed be soft. Now, we'll just kind of give you this hint. Microsoft has in its resource kits out there tools that will drill in and show you whether you're having soft or hard page faults. You can chase this down with Microsoft. On the Linux operating system, you'll just have to look and see, but the one thing we want to watch is watch the performance that's going on inside your virtual machine. If it's really slow, if it's really dragging, you probably got some sort of memory issue. But just make sure you understand that if you just kind of throw up a monitoring tool and you see a lot of page faults, take into consideration, wait a minute, if I've got a lot of RAM on a 64-bit machine and I'm applying a lot of RAM to my virtual machine, the more RAM I give it, I still may experience just as many page faults because these may be soft. And so just make sure you don't kind of chase your tail here because you're seeing a lot of page faults in these monitoring things, because our CPUs and our large memory spaces has kind of made page faults a little hard to decipher. Now again, go out to Microsoft's site, do a search on page faults. You'll see some links and knowledge base articles about how to determine these things, kind of what this whole issue is about. But just know that virtual computing has kind of amplified that problem, and I just wanted you to be aware of it here.